Welcome back to Sustainability Matters. I'm Tria Case. Today, we're thrilled to take you on a journey to one of New York City's most captivating locations, Governor's Island. We'll explore this historic island's ambitious transformation into a leading sustainability hub, guided by the visionary efforts of the New York Climate Exchange. But that's not all. Joining us in this discussion, we have esteemed guests from CUNY. They'll share insights on how CUNY students and faculty will play a pivotal role in this green evolution. Let's start by giving you an exclusive tour around Governor's Island to set the stage for the exciting developments ahead.
So the exchange emerged from a process by the city to create a Center for Climate Solutions on Governor's Island. There was already a hub of activities on the island, and let's build on that. And let's take account of the fact that this is an island. It has some vulnerabilities. It was hit pretty hard during Hurricane Sandy. And what better place to bring people together to talk about climate change? Stony Brook University is the anchor institution that brought together a multitude of different partners from academia, from the private sector, and community organizations around the city. We have partners in other parts of New York State, out on Long Island. I mentioned Stony Brook. We also have RIT. We have University of Washington as a partner, Georgia Tech, Duke University, and then Oxford University. 12 academic partners, CUNY being one, which means we get 25 for the price of one. And what we've enjoyed so much, the team and I, is meeting our partners, going to Brooklyn College, going to City College, Baruch, Hunter, hearing from experts at Kingsborough, and learning about, A, what they're doing, but what they'd like to do more of, or where they think we might be of support to them.
What are some of the solutions that you think need to happen next?
Which impact are you trying to anticipate? Is it stormwater management? Is it sea level rise? Is it increasingly warmer days or more hot days? Let's just take stormwater. The existing stormwater management system in the city, that's no longer going to suffice given the intensity of the rainfall. And seeing how City Hall, how DEP has tried to wrap their arms around this. They've created things like the Cloudburst program, which is really trying to anticipate and how you can create, again, different types of systems to help manage that. That's really impressive, but that needs to happen at a much bigger scale. That keeps coming back to, how do you pay for this? Is the public expected to pay for this? Is this something businesses need to get involved in and pay for the systems that are to be deployed on their own property? Or do we actually need to try and find, money from Wall Street and places like that to create new instruments that will appeal to them, but make it cheaper for those of us who want to take action, whether it's on stormwater management, whether it's on switching to a heat pump in my house or building. A second area where we've started to have conversations with different partners is the whole issue of mental health. People today are beginning to have climate anxiety. And that's something that they want to try and navigate, and they're not certain what that means. And so part of our strategy is, again, to begin to understand how can we create spaces where people can talk about this, where they can begin to learn more, where they can begin to take action that may actually put them in a position where they're helping to do something about it. So when we think of it's a mental health issue, it's an education issue, it's a workforce issue. It is the opportunity to engage in things at your community level. We think you need a lot of people at the table because they're all going to bring that different perspective. And that, I think, is going to create new and different ways to engage people and hopefully begin to address some of those underlying concerns they have that are driving that climate anxiety.
What do you think makes Governor's Island a place to be able to address these issues?
Well, look at it. I mean, A, it's a place you want to come. But B, this is, I think, one of the amazing opportunities we have when we're building a campus out here. And that's a longer term vision, several years in the future, where we'll have this. We will have classrooms. We will have research facilities. We will have tech incubation activities, so the solution developers are going to be right next to the classrooms and the research scientists. And then we're going to be creating space where people can come together and talk about it. So by having these things next to each other, we think there's going to be some really beautiful cross-fertilization of ideas. The way I often think about it is the students are going to learn about it in the classroom, but then they're going to go listen to the policy conversation, or they're going to go meet the engineers or the startups, or they're going to go talk to the scientists. It becomes much more tangible.
You've spoken a little bit about universities and researchers and policymakers. What about the citizen who comes to visit New York City, or somebody who lives here in New York City? How do they get involved with the climate exchange?
A few different ways. Panel discussions, amazing gatherings of experts in the tech sector or environmental justice advocates or youth groups. Then they can walk over to a nearby historic fort where there's an art exhibit that focuses on marine resources and how those are changing as a result of climate change. And public engagement in terms of access to the Billion Oyster Project. You can hear about what the students at the Harbor School are doing. You know, this is a really unique place, and what we've been trying to do is to celebrate all of that exists today, and then talk about what we're going to do to build on it for tomorrow. And the early programming will give people a taste of what is to come.
Fantastic. It's incredibly exciting, and it's an amazingly beautiful place to be able to come to work. So congratulations on what you're doing, and we look forward at CUNY to be working with you on into the future. Joining us today are two distinguished guests, Dr. Rosemarie Wesson, Associate Vice Chancellor and University Vice Provost for Research at CUNY, who will shed light on how CUNY's students and faculty will contribute to this and other climate initiatives, and Dr. William Solecki, Founding Director of the Institute for Sustainable Cities at Hunter College, who will offer insights into the broader impact of these sustainability efforts. Welcome. Thank you guys for both being here.
Yeah, thank you.
Rosemarie, let's just start with, what role does CUNY play in working on these climate initiatives to help New York City?
So, Tria, I know you're aware that CUNY, we have campuses in all 5 boroughs. We have 25 different campuses across CUNY, and those campuses affect that community. So we're having an impact on all 25 campuses. We're having an impact on all 5 boroughs. We're having an impact on the residents of those boroughs. So when we do research at CUNY, and we do research related to climate in terms of flooding, in terms of energy and sustainability, in terms of water, CO2, all types of research across CUNY, we're impacting New York City, we're impacting New York State, and we're actually impacting the nation in terms of the research that goes on here at CUNY.
It's amazing. It's amazing research. I'm looking forward to spending more time talking about the specifics. And actually, Bill, you sit on many of the panels that have been pulled together to address and come up with the solutions. How's the work coming out of those panels impacting New York City and more broadly?
Well, I mean, New York has been a leader over the last couple of decades looking at the connection between urbanization and climate action. And under Mayor Bloomberg back in 2007, the New York City panel on climate change was put together. They're now on the 4th report of that panel has come out. That specific report have really been transformative to the city because they've provided a whole new range of information about the physical science basis of climate change to understand how the climate is changing, how the sea level rises are changing. But equally important, it started to sort of bring forward recommendations with respect to how to transfer this new science into potential adaptation strategies that the city might want to consider. So looking at questions of where that sea level rise will be most impactful, understanding which communities might be more at risk, as well as sort of starting to provide some input into the city building process, like how to take into account some of the climate science into new regulatory controls and opportunities.
Have you found that some of the thoughts you had about, for example, how high the seas might rise, where the water might end up, has changed as you guys have started to look at the analysis on those reports?
That's a really important question. I think one of the big issues that's now emerging is that we're actually, in some cases, we thought we had a better idea of how emissions globally might connect to temperature increases locally. And what we're finding is that in some cases, we're experiencing increased rates of warming than we would have expected. That's a bigger question in the climate projection literature, but we're actually globally, we're edging towards some of these benchmark increases like 1.5 degrees C warming more rapidly than we would have expected.
How is all of this work helping to drive real change in policy or in our actions?
Well, particularly with respect to the city, a lot of the NPCC report information has been integrated through the mayor's office out into the various agencies. The one that I could always speak to is the idea of a new resiliency building program that the city has initiated, where buildings of a certain size have to incorporate certain elements to mitigate urban heat island or to promote flood protection. And this is a set of initiatives that really emerges out of the science that the NPCC has been able to bring forward.
So all of that drives this need for new solutions and for us to figure out what we're going to deploy in those buildings and elsewhere. Mm-hmm. Rosemarie, I just learned that CUNY has received $672 million in research funding.
Right.
So can you tell us a little bit about some of the research that we are seeing on our campuses?
So first of all, we're very proud of that number. I mean, that's one of the highest numbers. That is the highest number for research in CUNY's history.
That's fantastic.
So our researchers, our faculty, our staff, our students are doing an excellent job across all research areas, not only in terms of climate change, but across all research areas. So we are very proud. We're very proud of that. But in terms of climate change, we have a broad array. We have renewable energy type research, wind, solar, batteries, a huge array of research activities related to climate adaptation, related to climate mitigation. Some of the more recent activities, as which Bill referred to, we have recently received Department of Energy awards in terms of how do we actually look at the heat islands that are being assessed throughout the city. The Building Performance Lab, so in terms of reducing the CO2 levels, doing a great job along those lines. The FloodNet research in terms of developing sensors so that we can get real-time information. I mean, this is real-time information that helps the communities.
It's exciting. Bill, your focus is predominantly on urban areas.
Right.
How does urbanization impact climate change?
We know that only slightly more than half of the world's population live in cities, but cities are responsible for upwards of 70, maybe more percent of the greenhouse gas emissions. When we look at cities, we oftentimes describe them as sort of the most significant challenge area, but also the areas for potential climate solutions. Almost all the population growth that we're going to see over the next couple of decades are going to be in cities. Certainly some in places like the city of New York, but the vast majority of population growth is going to be in low and moderate income countries and small and medium-sized cities. Some of the other assessments that I've been involved with, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change and others, have been trying to understand what are the conditions of vulnerability and opportunities for increased resilience and mitigation, climate greenhouse gas mitigation in those kinds of places, and how to integrate new design elements into that infrastructure, and to not build out cities that are vulnerable to climate change, or increased numbers of people who are vulnerable, or create situations where people are going to be producing a lot of greenhouse gas emissions with the urbanization process. So it's one of these sort of great challenges that both CUNY researchers and students are really interested in. Like, how do we create cities as solutions?
Are there some core strategies that you think of as being most effective, or that you're seeing as part of CUNY's research?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things. One, I mean, Rose has sort of mentioned things like the Building Performance Lab, sort of to think about how can we examine the building footprint, the built environment, and retrofit these buildings, because we know most of the buildings, in future decades in the city of New York are here already. So we have to start thinking about how do we retrofit them. At the global scale, we also have to sort of connect issues of inequity and economic inequity. So if we're going to be, trying to integrate climate action into that, we also have to provide opportunities for economic development. And the last point, which CUNY researchers are really contributing to as well, is this issue of equity. We need to embed the equity considerations early and often into the process, along with community engagement, or else it's just not going to work. The capacity for transformative change and accelerating that change is not going to work unless we sort of embed that very early on.
And also collaboration, just making sure that we're working with everyone in order to make that happen.
Absolutely.
Rose, what are some of the examples of how CUNY is collaborating with government, private sector, and others in order to make sure that we see these things happen?
So we are collaborating both internally and externally. Externally, as I referred to, we have funding from government agencies, we have funding from the city, we have funding from the state to do this type of climate-related research. We're also talking about industry funding. We have industry partners that we're working with in terms of Google, IBM, funding researchers to do research in these climate change areas. We are also looking at the Conservancy Group. They partner with CUNY in terms of research funding for our researchers. But we're looking to collaborate internally as well, because CUNY, as I said, is a big place. And we have research going on at various campuses, and sometimes the researchers are not familiar with the research that's happening at a neighbor campus. So we're trying to bring together the campuses in terms of conferences, webinars, information sessions. One of the things that Bill, I think you're familiar with, is C3, the CUNY Climate Consortium, holding webinars, holding conferences, bringing climate researchers together within CUNY to discuss what I call these wicked problems, these challenging climate-related problems. And so we don't only need scientists and engineers, we need people from all disciplines coming together, such that we need sociologists, we need psychologists, we need economics folks to come together to help solve some of these climate challenges. One of the things that I think Bill and the other researchers throughout CUNY are familiar with is the Climate Justice Hub. So that's a partnership between CUNY and New York City, where we go out into the communities and we address the needs of the actual residents in the community.
And one of the really innovative parts of that is that the communities can come forward to CUNY and say, hey, we've got this problem or we've got this issue, can you help us?
Right.
And then that becomes a vehicle to sort of draw in researchers from throughout CUNY in a way to sort of assemble them, almost as a team to sort of engage with community. That's a very innovative model that I think is potentially going to be really transformative to not only CUNY's opportunity for change, but also for enhancing, real climate equity in the city.
Putting our labs to use and our
Right.
thinkers to use
Yeah.
in terms of solving the problems
Demand-driven.
that
That are currently out there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
100%.
and this is really to both of you. What do you see as our biggest challenge going forward, and what do you think is going to make the difference? What's going to help us really take the next step to move the ball?
I typically say we need to go out and speak with our Congress people. We need to speak with our senators. We need to speak with our representatives. We actually need more funding in order to move the needle in terms of climate change. It's going to be research that helps solve the climate change challenges. We can get people to reduce, to reuse, to recycle, but we also need research to address that need. And it's a multi-pronged approach in order to solve this wicked problem. And here I'm going to make a plug for Research in Focus. Research in Focus is a news e-magazine that CUNY is putting out to highlight the research that's happening throughout CUNY. So it's one way to let researchers know that we appreciate the work that they're doing and highlight their activities, but it's another way in which we can get people throughout CUNY to know what's going on in various areas.
Those are great points. One of the big challenges is developing the institutional capacity for change, and then sort of the cultural kind of comfort with change. I mean, people don't like change. And so the idea of making even simple adjustments, we've heard, even the last year about like whether or not you should use a gas stove versus an electric stove, and the sort of the uproar that emerged, out of that, as a little minor thread into that conversation. But within that, it's the idea of the institution and the governance capacity to work across multiple scales of governance. And you mentioned partnerships as well, but it's, it's sort of like how to connect the local to the regional, to provincial, state, national, and how to connect governments in ways that, can be adaptive. I mean, that is a huge challenge. We just don't know how to do that enough with respect to the speed at which we need action. Kind of digging into that a little bit more, one of the big issues that still is somewhat lacking, it varies in different contexts, but it's the capacity for evaluation and measurement and indicators. How do we know we're actually making a difference? And what are the systems and how robust are they? And so what's the data that we can use to manage the process of a climate transition or climate transformation?
And agreeing on those standards.
Yes, exactly. Of course, 100%. I mean, this is so central because that is then rich for debate. I think CUNY is out front on this, but I think universities and colleges need to sort of continue their reimagining of how they can engage with communities in more of an extension, broadly defined model, where they're working within communities, not just parachuting in, but for long-term engagements for years. And this is obviously what CUNY does, but to really have that as a centerpiece of their work. But then the crucial part of it is also to sort of provide opportunity where academics can be evaluated positively with respect to those evaluations. It's more challenging to get positively evaluated for community engagement or other kinds of sort of sustained engagements with community. So I think we need to sort of rethink that a little bit. I think CUNY has made a lot of progress in that space, but many universities and colleges haven't done that.
We're sort of that trusted third party in the marketplace when we work with our communities and our
Absolutely.
agencies and so on. Yeah, it's a lot of moving pieces to get us to where we need to be, a lot of different technologies.
But we're making progress. We are making progress.
Yeah.
And we have so much more information now, thanks to the great work that folks like you are doing. So thank you for your work, and thank you for being with us here in studio today.
Thank you for having us. Thank you for highlighting research.
Yes, thank you so much.
Let's hear from a CUNY student involved with climate research.
I'm Caera Beightol. I'm a third-year student at Hunter College, and my major is environmental studies. This past semester, I took a class called Cities and Climate Change with Bill Solecki at Hunter, and that class opened my mind to the ways that cities can be primary change makers when it comes to decarbonization, and because of that, they can pave the way for change in nations around the world. I was able to work on a project that I was interested in, which is gentrification in the South Bronx. And out of that research, Bill was able to connect me to the Urban Climate Change Resource Network, where I'm working on building case studies similar to what I was interested in class, but now I'm doing real-world case studies for the network. Each case study is going to be uniquely applicable based on its population size, its coastal status, its GDP, or various different factors and dimensions of the city. So my job in checking all the data is to make sure that every city and every case study is accurate, up to date, and reflects the current state of the city it's discussing. CUNY does a great job of preparing students academically for the challenges of research, but in my experience, it's also the faculty themselves who are such a great resource for students in that they're both deeply knowledgeable and very well connected to initiatives around the city. Just this past month during Climate Week NYC, CUNY students were able to volunteer at Governor's Island with the exchange, and I heard so many stories from different students coming back just blown away by everything that's going on in terms of sustainability initiatives. There's also students involved in the Billion Oyster Project in New York, and that's something that's brought up in class. It's something that faculty has even integrated in the class curriculum. Students are also connected through the Science and Resilience Institute at Jamaica Bay, and that's just one of many ways that students can get involved directly while they're at CUNY. I think a lot of people in my generation can relate to this increasing feeling of wanting to bridge the gap between what's currently being done to protect life on our planet and what needs to be done. And taking Bill's class at Hunter made me realize that there's so much interdisciplinary effort that can be made. And I think I personally want to be part of addressing those bottlenecks to change. And because of how diverse the problems are, the solutions have to be diverse.
Please keep the conversation going and follow us or send us a message on social media. Be sure to join us next month to discuss misinformation and how you can combat it with accurate information and effective, data-driven resources.